ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। श्री श्री कृष्ण बलराम की जय, निताय की जय। So here Devahuti is inquiring about some very important aspects of devotional service. So she wants to know about one of the forms of the Lord which is present in this material world as Kala or time. In just the first and second verse, Prabhupada explains why Lord Kapila will describe time in many verses. So there is a reason for it. It is to detach the living entities from material activities. See, the whole process of devotional service is to detach from material activities which are illusory activities in which we are engaged. That is how Lord Chaitanya has described Jiva jago gora chandir bole koto nidra jao maya pishachir kole. That actually you are sleeping on the lap of Maya, so you become awakened. So one may wonder, where am I sleeping? Everybody is awake only. There are all different activities people are doing. So how are you saying they are sleeping? So unless a person actually awakens to Krishna consciousness, he is considered to be sleeping only. That we should understand. All our activities carried out in ignorance, they are considered to be as good as sleep. So we have to become awakened. When we begin our real activities in Krishna consciousness, that is real awakening. And that is how we find Dhruva Maharaj in his first prayer, he said, earlier my senses were sleeping, you have awakened them. Yo antah pravishya mama vacham imam prasuptam. They were all sleeping. So, Prabhupada says this very nicely, that why Krishna is describing, why Lord Kapila is going to describe time factor in detail. See, the purpose of elaborately describing the influence of time is to detach the conditioned soul from his material activities, which are considered to be simply a waste of time. So, we are engaged in activities which are meaningless, sheer waste of time, and actually are cause of our bondage. The more we engage in material activities, the more we will suffer and we become encaged in this material world. So, very kindly, Mother Devahuti is asking Lord Kapila that please describe the influence of time, so that by understanding the influence of time, the living entity will become awakened. They will detach themselves from material activities. So you will wonder how it is possible. Just by understanding about time, how the living entity will become detached from material activities. Isn't it? So actually, we will find this explanation Lord Kapila will be giving. So I'll just give a little gist about that. How Lord Kapila will describe the influence of time, and by understanding that actually we will become detached. At least if we are sober, if we are intelligent. So, Lord Kapila describes, in order to facilitate our material existence, the Lord takes a form of time, impersonal form of time in this material world. What he does, the living entities have a desire to lord it over this material nature. So in order to satisfy his desire, the living entities need to come to this material world, to this material manifestation. Now, material energy of the Lord, it is not capable of getting the living entity here and try to exploit it. It is not possible. The example is given. The nipples of the goat may look like nipple, but actually it has no capacity to give milk. Similarly, this material energy of the Lord, it has no capacity to beget living entities here. It is the Supreme Lord who expands in the form of Kala, time. And by the influence of Kala, the living entities are born in this material world. Prabhupada says that. Prabhupada quotes from Srila Jiva Goswami. Very nice. We will find that in the future verses, Prabhupada explaining this. Impersonal time factor is the background of material manifestation. As a woman cannot produce children unless impregnated by man, Similarly, material nature cannot beget living entities unless impregnated by time, the impersonal form of the Supreme Lord. So, the living entities are begotten in this material world by the time factor. So what happens? The living entities have come to this material world by the influence of the Supreme Lord in His form as time factor. Krishna says that, Tasya garbha dadami aham. This Mahat Yoni, this material nature is called Mahat Yoni because all living entities are born in this. And the seed-giving father, Aham Bija Pradapita, Krishna says. So that Bija is given by the Supreme Lord in the form of time. That is also one of the representation of the Supreme Lord, one of the impersonal form of the Supreme Lord. Then what happens? Prabhupada says, the material nature thus works under the superintendence of time factor as the Lord Himself. So, how the Lord is? First, as Krishna Himself says in Bhagavad Gita, He is the seed-giving Father. So the living entities are brought in this material world, and the time factor is the one which begets, which gives the seed in this material world. So living entities are born. Then Prabhupada is explaining, it is the time factor, it is under the superintendence of the time factor that material nature produces so many wonderful things. Because Krishna is directly not present. Avyakta Murtina, He is not directly present. This Avyakta Murtina is the time factor. He is present in His impersonal feature as time factor. So, Prabhupada is saying, the material nature works under the superintendence of time factor as the Lord Himself. And that is why material nature appears to have produced so many wonderful things in cosmic manifestation. And then Prabhupada quotes that verse, Maya adhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Krishna is saying, it is under my superintendence this material nature is working, it is not working independently. So it is working under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord, Ayat Adhyakshena. So, and that is through the time factor. Now, once the living entities come in this material world, they are begotten by the time factor. Everything is controlled. Whatever we are seeing material creation is happening, it is by time factor. Now, the time factor starts the influence on everything in this material world according to the plan of the Supreme Lord. What is the plan of the Supreme Lord? In the spiritual world, everything is Sat, Chit and Ananda. Now time factor deteriorates everything to Asat, Achit and Nirananda. In order to give the living entity a kind of a lesson for him to learn and understand that in reality he cannot be independent of the Supreme Lord. So this time factor helps the living entity to enjoy or exploit this material world in illusion, and the nature of this time factor is that it is destructive in nature. It is destructive in nature. And because of this destructive nature, the living entities can become detached from material activities. Like here it is said, in today's class if you see, those who are pious people, when they understand the influence of time factor, they all engage in pious activities, being afraid of time factor. Because they are not aware of eternal existence. So they are at least thinking that why to waste time? Let me gain some profit. So they invest in time. How? By doing some pious activities. So they are thinking we are suffering because of impious activities. Time is unfolding impious results of our impious activities and we suffer. So they have no idea that we can actually cross over the influence of time itself. That is how you find Krishna is saying, Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukirtino arjuna. They are all pious people. They are approaching even the Supreme Lord for some temporary benefit. Isn't it? Artha, money, artharto, distressed, jignasu, inquisitive, jnani, person who is in knowledge. So these kind of people, four kind of people approach. So they have no idea that actually beyond this influence of time, there is a world where there is no influence of time. So here the moment the living entity comes, we are subjected to two things: influence of illusory energy and influence of time. Maya, illusory energy, creates that which is not, because this is what we wanted, isn't it? We wanted to be enjoyer. Maya creates a platform to make us think with false ego, yes, I am the enjoyer. I am the controller. Ishwaroham, Bhoktaham. Isn't it? So this influence is created by Maya Shakti. And what is the purpose of time? So time facilitates this activity. Folding and unfolding of our results of pious and impious activities we do. And because of the destructive nature of influence of time, whatever we do is subject to destruction. So through the influence of time, the Lord wants the living entity to surrender. Through the influence of Maya, the Lord is giving the facility you enjoy. And of course, it is illusory energy of the Lord. Factual happiness is not there. Factual objects of senses are not there. And that is why there is no satisfaction. So the living entity is frustrated in his attempt to enjoy. So sometimes that is how it is explained, sometimes he is getting bitter fruits, sour fruits, sometimes some sweet fruits, and he is just engaged in eating those fruits. But the time factor is passing, and the time factor reminds him how long you will enjoy. Okay, you are very happy. You have created a bungalow. You have created a bank balance. You have created a family around you. And then time factor comes into picture, and everything so hard workingly we accumulated is all destroyed. So this is the work of the time factor. Prabhupada says, in Bhagavatam it is said, that by the influence of time factor, father produces a child, he gives birth to a child. By the influence of time, the father after some time dies also. And by the influence of time, even the cause of death, Yamraj, one who is bringing about death of the living entity in this material world, even he also is destroyed. This is the destroying nature of time. That the death, fear which is because of Yamraj, even he also cannot exist. Even he is destroyed over a period of time. This is the influence of time factor. So, devotees, they understand it very clearly that the influence of time factor is that some span is given to me, certain time is given to me in this material world. Life is eternal in the spiritual world. There is no influence. Prabhupada explains this. Krishna is eternal, living entities are eternal, and that occupation of living entity in the spiritual world, that is also eternal. That is why it is called Sanatan Dharma. That occupation of serving the Supreme Lord, loving service, that is also eternal. That is not influenced by time. Influence of time is created by the Lord for the conditioned soul in this material world, so that the living entity can come to their senses. Prabhupada says that, just like the policeman, when he is hitting the criminal, it is a mercy so that actually he can come to the senses when he suffers. So this is the influence of time. So what a devotee understands, and that is why we find great personality like Chanakya Pandit, they have given that actually devotee should utilize the time very, very wisely. Because he says even one moment of time lost, very beautifully Prabhupada explains, one moment of time lost, you cannot purchase with any amount of whatever you may have. And it is the greatest loss in life. Greatest loss. So that is how devotees understand the value of time. That some times is given. For everything you will find time. Universe may have a bigger time. The universe comes into existence. That is why you find in Bhagavatam there is atomic time, there is universal time. But time exists for everyone. That has to be understood. Atom is created, sometimes Prabhupada gives an example. There are some living entities. They are born in the morning, and by the time it is night, they are dead and gone. So their time is very small. Our time is little bigger. Brahma's time is very big. But one day even Brahma has to die. When Brahma is sleeping in the night, so many living entities are gone. All the lower planetary systems are dissolved. Only higher planets are remaining. Again Brahma, in the next day, again he has to create. But one day when Brahma has to die, this whole universe itself goes back into the Supreme Lord, merges into the Supreme Lord. So that is called universal time. So bigger time, smaller time, all these times are there. Everybody is given time. So importance is to understand that, okay, I am in certain body and I have a particular time. Not even by one moment I can increase my time. So how I utilize this time is very important. That is considered to be very important. Today's conversation, Prabhupada explains something very beautifully. When that person, Richard, Prabhupada was asking, do you think they have made advancement? So he was saying in certain things, yes, but otherwise practically there is no advancement. Very beautiful example, worth understanding and very useful in our preaching when we preach to the people. See, I'll read this. Prabhupada, so there are so many problems. On the whole, material world is full of problems. So we can see this is the influence of Maya, influence of time. That is described in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, Dukhalyam Ashashvatam. It is a place of misery. You cannot make things very rightly going on. It is not possible. Therefore, best purpose will be served. Leave this place, material world. Go to the spiritual world. That is our Krishna consciousness. And actually that is what the time factor wants to achieve also. By all the unfolding of miseries in this material world, that everything is temporary, you work so hard, finished, time is gone, your time is over, get out, Prabhupada says, isn't it? So that we can become detached, that what am I doing, why am I struggling so hard? Factually there is no happiness, it is Dukhalyam, Krishna is saying. So what should we do to become detached from here and actually go back to Godhead, which is our eternal place? To be engaged there eternally in the service of the Lord. Isn't it? This is our Krishna consciousness movement. We are advising people to become Krishna conscious, and that way he will be able to leave this place of miseries and enter this eternal life in the spiritual world. Tyaktva deham punarjanmanaeti mameti swarjuna. And then Prabhupada is quoting these words. Mam upetya punarjanma dukhalyam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramam gataha. We don't try to adjust things here. It is not possible. However big philosophers I may be, I may give my ideas, it will never be possible to make here things peaceful. No, that is not possible. And then Prabhupada is giving a very beautiful example. Just like if you want to make laboratory very scientifically, it is after all laboratory. Every minute it is becoming contaminated. Just this Sunday, when I was just passing by, so I was seeing, because lots of people come on Sundays and lots of people use our laboratory. So we were discussing that better on Sundays at least we should increase the frequency of cleaning that laboratory, because otherwise it will smell like anything. Because Prabhupada is saying laboratory means this is the nature of laboratory. every moment it is becoming contaminated. So you are scientifically trying to improve the laboratory, but after all it is laboratory only, isn't it? So every minute it is becoming contaminated. So similarly, this world is so contaminated, you cannot make it completely free from contamination. This is not possible. Dukhalyam ashashvatam. It is a place of miseries. Actually, it is a fact. Now we are trying to get out of misery, is it not? So, this is what actually this whole material world is. Prabhupada says the time factor is so destructive, it is so strong that even spiritual practices are sometimes lost. Krishna explains that in Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says, Sakalena mahata yogo nashtaha param tapa. This is the nature of this material world. Krishna has to keep coming again and again and again and again to keep reminding us about that spiritual world. Because the nature of this material world is like that we forget everything. That is the meaning of Maya, as the time is passing by. So Prabhupada is saying, the time factor is so pressing that in the course of time, everything in material world is spoiled or lost. And Prabhupada is saying, and that is why Krishna has to once again he has to repeat Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, and Krishna is saying, I gave this knowledge many millions of years back to sun god Vivasvan. Vivasvan gave it to Manu, and then over a period of time this knowledge was lost. So Prabhupada says, the fear of death is also due to the time factor. In other words, time is destructive. Therefore, it reminds us that we must surrender to the Supreme Lord. So this is actually the time factor in the form of time factor. The Supreme Lord is somehow or other giving us an impetus that we must surrender unto Him. And Krishna is saying that you simply surrender unto me, then you have no more fear. Ma shucha sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarve papebhyo mokshashyami. Actually, as per the time factor, even our material reactions have to become manifest, but Krishna is assuring that if we surrender unto Him, then even those material reactions, Krishna is saying, I will wipe them away. So, that is the whole idea of this time factor, how the living entities becomes entangled in this material world by the influence of this time factor, and how things are destroyed, so that the living entity can gradually understand his eternal nature. And of course, Prabhupada explains, for the devotees, even in this material world, if he becomes engaged in Krishna consciousness, there is no influence of time. Bhagavatam explains that. Bhagavatam says, for those who are engaged in hearing Krishna Katha, even the rising of the sun or the setting of the sun actually cannot take away their life. So devotee, actually Prabhupada explains what is the meaning of this. We should not misunderstand, because the devotees understand that actually here in this material world, if somehow or other I am engaged in the service of the Lord, and then after leaving this world, what is my business? I am once again engaged in the service of the Lord. So there is no difference for him. Dying, leaving this body, is just giving up one place and taking another place again to serve the Supreme Lord. That famous example Prabhupada used to give, that the sage gave different kinds of benedictions, and to the devotee he said, Jivo va maro va, there is no difference. Either you live or you die, there is no difference, because when you are living you are serving, and when you die you again go and serve the Supreme Lord. So there is no difference. So in that sense the son cannot take away his life. His life is eternal. Giving up this material life is waiting to give up this material life and enter into the eternal life of Krishna consciousness. Whereas for other it is fearful, because they have no idea where they are going after death. No idea where they are going. So for them it is fearful. So devotee is not afraid of the time factor. So we'll stop with this. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada.